Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for coming today. We just want to let you know that this is about the top 10 violations missed last year. It does not include those non-criticals, which will be part of, will be regular violations in the upcoming when we change. Mr. Schaefer discussed going to the 47 question inspection report. For all of y'all that have been in the industry for 15-ish years, probably, you remember the old 47 question inspection report. I remember it. I've been in the industry for a while. So thank you for coming. And some of those non-criticals would be, now we're moving to the first aid kits in the past we never looked for, bloodborne pathogen kits, basically any bodily fluids that need to be cleaned up. You need to have something like that on site to clean that up. The dumpster lids being open, the drain plug missing, bulk containers not labeled like sugar, utensils and standing water. Those will all be violations moving forward. So who's in for food safety? All of y'all. We thank you because this is what we typically see when we walk into a school. I thank you as a parent because I have 2 kids in public schools. We thank you from the industry, and just thank you for putting everything in. I know that y'all get there very early in the morning. You keep the kitchens clean. You protect our kids, and that's what it's about, protecting the kids when it comes to food safety with schools. So who's betting on keeping food contact surfaces clean? This was the #1 missed violation last year, 93 times. So examples of that would be dirty ice machines. Hopefully none of y'all's ice machines look like this, but food contact surfaces were missed, the #1 item missed. So make sure you have a cleaning schedule when it comes to cleaning your ice machine. You don't have to clean it daily because mold debris doesn't build up like that. Clean it once a week, a good cleaning, burn out the ice. Make sure it's clean because you may not know that, but I can taste the mold in the ice when I get a drink. So you want to make sure that none of your kids can taste it. Can opener blades, make sure you're cleaning those every time you use it. You want to make sure that you replace it once you start getting rust on it. Old storage containers, that's another commonly missed thing in schools and just establishments in general. Once they start to crack and melt, you can't get into those crevices to clean them properly. So who are taking odds on proper warewashing and sanitizing? Basically, what does that mean? Do you use a 3-compartment sink to wash dishes? You're required to have at least a 3-compartment sink. Some have dish machines as well. So when we go in there and your 3-compartment sink is set up, we're looking for hot water that you're washing with at least 110 degrees. You're rinsing. You don't have to have the rinse compartment set up. You can use the spray arm. And that your sanitizer is at proper concentrations. So those are all things that could have been missed under this item. But if you're using a dish machine, what we typically see is the surface temperature. That's what we check when we go out and do the dish. You may not be using the dish machine, but we check it anyway. And so many times I go out there, you have your test strip on the wall. It's been checked, but you're using 180-degree strips. So never was it ever on temperature, but there's not any notes. You say, okay, I tested it. Now what do I do? You just want to make sure that you use those resources and you are making sure that surface of the dish is reading 160 degrees and you have the right test strips. And under the same question, sanitized buckets not strong enough. They're within the correct range. So in your bags, you do have little test strips for bleach, chlorine sanitizer. Most schools use Quat. Is that correct? I don't know if there's really any schools out there that still use bleach, but in the instance that you still do use a chlorine sanitizer, you want to make sure it's between 50 and 200 parts per million, and that the Quat is between 200 and 400. But you want to make sure you look at the manufacturer's labels because those might have a different range. So if it's not strong enough, this is where it's marked. So miss #2. So obviously, maybe we need to work on that one as well. Talking about sanitized buckets, this is where it falls under if they're too strong. So the whole idea, if they're too strong, if your chemicals aren't labeled properly, you're not stored properly, want to make sure that you're labeling them properly. This may be Windex, we don't really know. You want to make sure you just have at least a minimum name, Windex, glass cleaner, and that you store them above, below, away from food products. And this is another labeling issue. We know in the industry this red bucket means sanitizer. I review other inspector reports. There's so many times that I see sanitized bucket not labeled properly. Even though we know in the industry this is a sanitized bucket, maybe you have a new employee coming in that doesn't necessarily know. You have the green bucket, you have the red bucket, and they're new, so they're a little confused, and they're using the wrong bucket to wipe surfaces. So they use that green bucket that has soap in it instead of sanitizer, and they're cleaning countertops. They're not sanitizing that countertop, they're just wiping it down with soap. So, I mean, you can buy the buckets now that actually are engraved that say sanitizer. But in this instance, just get a magic marker, a Sharpie, and write sanitizer on it. And then stored. We know to store them below, away from food surfaces, prep areas, storage. Chemicals don't necessarily mean spray bottles of bleach or Windex. It's medications. Sternos, when you do special events, you have the little sternos. That's a chemical. Bug spray, off. We talked about the Zika virus. You might be seeing more off in the industries. Just make sure you're storing that away from the food and treat it as a chemical. And then if it's too strong, those little white strips, when they turn purple and then turn white again, that basically means it's way too strong because now you've bleached it back to its original white paper. So that's too strong. Bright purple is also too strong. And then fluorescent green for the quat sanitizer, that is also too strong. When you can really smell that sanitizer and it's pink, you can actually see it pink, it's too strong. Make sure that you use the proper test strips, and because the whole idea is that when you wipe a countertop and it dries, it evaporates the sanitizer. If there's too much sanitizer in there, the residue will stay on the countertop, and if you put some buns on there, then it can transfer onto the food product and possibly get someone sick. All in for approved systems. This is a lot of wordiness. HACCP, plans, and time as a public health control. Does anyone know what that means? No. Basically, am I putting a date on food? When you have 7 days, some schools still will make food in advance and then cool it down and put it in the refrigerator. So that's a prepared item. You have 7 days from the day you cook it to use it again or discard it. Or in another instance, you have a big bag of cheese, you put it in a container as shown there. You want to make sure you use it within 7 days and put that use by 7 day mark on there. If it's less than 24 hours, you can put it in the container, put it in the refrigerator, and it's not a big deal. You just want to make sure that you do serve it or discard it within the 24 hours. That would be lunch meat as well, not just cheese, lunch meat. Milk is another problem. I think daycares usually have that issue that provide milk. Just make sure, even though it has that date on there, the county still requires you to have that 7 day use by date. And then the other part of this question is time. There's so many times when you have 4 hours to have the food just sitting at room temperature where you have to serve it, cool it, reheat it, discard it. And a lot of times at schools, you serve you're preparing hamburgers and you have them in the warmer and they've been out too long. And so when the inspector comes in, they start taking temperatures in the warmer and the food's at 120 degrees. And you're like, well, I just put it in there. Why don't you can just put a 4 hour time frame. The time you start it, time you put the food in there, and the time you're going to discard it. Because usually that food, you serve that food within that lunch period. So if you just use a timestamp for that, that would go into the same question. So we have some opportunities of improvement in this area as well. And if you're not sure how to use it, ask your inspector when they go out there, and they can give you different options on either holding food hot or maybe preparing food in smaller portions. I know when you wrap the burgers, you put it in the thing. Sometimes there's this huge tray, so maybe just use food in smaller batches. And then don't take a chance on sound condition. Anybody know what that means? Anyone been marked off for that? Dennet cans. Got dennet cans. Perfect. So we know you want to get credit for those cans that were delivered dennet. And we know that you usually put them aside. You wait for the delivery guy to come back so you can get gridded. So that's not a big deal. Just make sure that you segregate them in a different area. You mark them as do not use, dented cans, and then tell your inspector, train your employees as well, because so many times if the inspector doesn't know and they're just sitting there, same thing as a new employee. I'm a new employee coming in. I'm not really sure of what your rules and regulations are, and you tell me to go get a can. I'm going to go get that can because it's set aside. So you want me to use that one first, right? No. So just make sure you also let the inspector know when we come in, oh, that's for returns and credits.
So our number 6 violation found within the schools was dealing with thermometers, right? All or nothing for thermometers. You want to make sure, first, it's properly calibrated. Can someone in here walk me through the calibration step of a thermometer? Ice method.
I get a cup with some squishy ice and water.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. If you get your thermometer in there, let it jiggle for a second.
Uh-huh.
You'll use this sleeve. You'll stick your thermometer into it. This will now become
Right.
your standard thermometer.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, you will, after it jiggles for a little bit, then you will set it to 32 where water freezes. And then it's calibrated. And you calibrate it if you drop it. You calibrate it every time you're starting work. You calibrate it after,
You should come
before
work
you
for
start
us.
work
Look.
and if you drop it.
Good job. That was perfect. That was the correct answer. Another thing we found in schools in 2015 is that we did not have the proper thermometers for the type of food we were preparing. So in your bags, everyone now has the thin tip thermometers. So no one in this room will get that violation again, right? Because we all have our thermometers, okay? Our number 7th violation. Don't make a blind bet on hand washing facilities. Can anyone tell me the difference between adequate and accessible? There's been some cause of concern in the year of 2015, the difference between adequate hand washing facilities and accessible. So adequate, what do I mean by adequate? I mean that every hand washing station must at least reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Can anybody tell me why that is? Why do we need it to reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit? Right, to kill the germs. It's also a good way to activate the soap that you're using, right? You want to get that soap good and foamy, okay? So we want to kill the germs. Also, you want to make sure you have an adequate number of hand sinks in the facility. There aren't any standard number of hand sinks, but you want to make sure that it's accessible for your employees, that it's convenient for them. You don't want them prepping food here and have to walk 300 feet away to use a hand washing sink. Because guess what? They're not going up there to use a hand washing sink. So you want to make it convenient for them so that they'll properly use it, okay? Accessible. What do I mean by accessible? The hand washing sink can only be used for hand washing. You can't store any of your dirty equipment in there. You can't store anything in your hand washing sink that makes it inaccessible for your employees to use. What we also see is that sometimes you'll have like a big tray blocking it or your cooling racks blocking it. All that makes it inaccessible for your employees to use a hand washing sink. And they're not going to walk 300 feet to get to the other one, okay? So we want to make sure that it's an open area and that we have everything there.
And when we're washing our hands there, just tell us to, scoot over. Don't go wash your hands at the 3-compartment sink. It's okay. We'll move out of your way.
So with that being said, we want to double down on hand washing facilities, soap, or paper towels. Can anybody tell me why it's important to wash your hands? No germs, right? So our primary objective, as Dr. Shaw and Mr. Schaefer talked about, is preventing foodborne illnesses. So our best bet is to make sure that we're killing those germs immediately before we start handling food. Even though we may be wearing gloves, you still want to make sure that you're washing your hands. And you can't properly wash your hands if you do not have hand soap and paper towels. Or that hot water, right? You need the hot water. So this was the number 8 commonly found violation in 2015. Okay, so make sure, again, you have hand washing, soap,
missing?
And paper towels. Everything, huh? No paper towels. Well, we have the soap there. We have some water.
The sign will now be a separate violation under other. I think it's 1 point.
Yes, 1 point for that one. Proper labeling. Don't rely on beginner's luck. Does anybody in here have prepackaged food items such as your sandwiches or salads or even the drinks available for the students to retrieve themselves? Or is everything behind the counter? Any schools have it out? And do you guys have labels on them? No. You have a variance, right? That's part of the process. That's okay. You all have variances, right? Okay, so that is it. There's two options, okay, under the labeling code. You can either, if it's out for public reach, meaning the students can grab the item themselves, you have to have it labeled with the food ingredients all the way down to the condiments, the manufacturing location, which is your facility. You also must have the address, the ingredients, and the weight, okay? However, you can also apply for a variance through our department, which most of you, I think most of the schools also have a variance. With that variance, you are exempt from having that label, okay? So finally, the number 10 commonly found violation in our schools. Water supply. Let's hit the jackpot with water supply. What do I mean by that? Some items to consider. First, you want to make sure that there's hot water in the building, okay? For the most part, schools don't have this as a big issue. That's why it's the number 10th commonly found violation. What we'll find is that one sink may take 20 minutes to get hot just due to the distance of the water heater and things like that, okay? And then backflow prevention. So if you have those long hoses that can sometimes zip below the rim, you want to make sure that you have some kind of device to keep them above the rim. What you're trying to prevent is that soiled, dirty water backflowing into our system and thus contaminating our clean water supply. Does that make sense?